Yeah.
Yes.
That was not that long ago. And now you don't at all.
So that has been a
in my
massive
lifetime,
change.
it's changed massively, you know. And I do think you've got to take the big perspective on this. I know that there's a long way to go, but I think the tide has turned, eh?
5-5, the panel. Now, a new report out from the University of Auckland today about public attitudes towards breastfeeding in public, and apparently we're overwhelmingly in favour, or at least overwhelmingly not against it. 19,000 people were surveyed about their attitudes, with only 5% opposed to public breastfeeding and 3/4 holding positive views on it. So according to the researchers, it's the first comprehensive overview of New Zealanders' views on breastfeeding. And Nikki, this has got to be a heartening survey, surely. I mean, 19,000 people, only 5% opposed. But does it surprise you?
Well, I would say to that 5%ers, what would you rather have, a screaming, hungry baby or a breast? Because I know what I'd prefer. I mean, really.
That's a good point.
Wouldn't you just? Because there's nothing worse than a baby screaming, is there? And it's hungry, for goodness sake. Let it eat. So I think that it's great that women can feel comfortable to breastfeed in public, but the 5% needs to work on their attitude.
I want to just chuck something out to you here, because there was a couple of years ago an independent review in the UK looking at MPs breastfeeding in the House of Commons. Now, a former speaker, Baroness Boothroyd, said, this is what she said, quoting, "You wouldn't start feeding your child if you worked on a supermarket checkout or if you were a solicitor having a meeting with a client." What would you say to her?
Well, I guess it'd be difficult on a supermarket checkout, wouldn't it, to perform your function as a checkout operator. But I think in a situation where it's not difficult, you know, some jobs it just wouldn't work. But I think women should be encouraged to breastfeed for longer, and if it's happening in the workplace, great. Really.
Ian, your thoughts on this? We surprised?
I was surprised, but I was also relieved in a sense to see that, because I feared that there might be more of a backlash. Only 5% of people, and I mean, I've got over it in my life. I mean, when I was younger, I was like, oh my gosh, women are putting their breasts in public, you know. But I get over it, you know. I think this is another one. It seems like the theme of the day, doesn't it? You know, we're going through a period of quite a lot of social change, and this is another one where I think we just we've pretty much got over it, haven't we? And it's a great thing. So.
Yeah. Hey, before we go, brief comment to finish off with keeping yourself safe at Christmas time. ACC has released its annual list of strange Christmas injuries. Apparently last year more than 4,500 people were injured on Christmas Day alone, so that includes people hurting themselves barbecuing, you know, the lights. It's a minefield, isn't it?
Well, Christmas Day is very dangerous.
It's an extreme sport. Yeah.
It is indeed.
You've got the sort of, you're prodding the turkey with your... You know, that
hot meat juices.
The one I liked best was wine corks in the eyes. Apparently that's a real thing. And apparently,
champagne corks are actually super dangerous, aren't they? People have lost eyes.
Yeah.
That's extraordinary.
Have you both had any sort of Christmas injuries?
Crackers, you could pull something with the cracker, couldn't you?
You could. Christmas cricket apparently is quite a dangerous thing. I did get whacked in Christmas cricket when I was young, and I've got a scar to prove that.
I think I've just mainly overeaten. That would be.
That's absolutely. Yeah, they didn't put that one down. It has been wonderful having you on. And another lovely text here. In 1976, I worked at the Department of Health. A chain smoker sat at the desk in front of me and within view of reception. No one said a word. It was her right in the smoke.
Changed, eh?
Nikki Pellegrino and Ian Telfer, it has been a delight to have you on the panel.
Thank you, Wallace.
Jim Mora is back Monday.
Kei te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. You're listening to Checkpoint. I'm Lisa Owen. On tonight's programme, All Blacks coach Steve Hansen's to-the-point resignation. I'm going. But first, he's in the hunt for rugby's holy grail, a third consecutive World Cup victory. So who will fill his boots? Is Hansen endorsing a successor? We have an update on the story of the seriously ill beneficiary forced to live in his car, who won the battle to wipe his $10,000 accommodation debt. But where's his apology from MSD? A slip in Dunedin forces families out of their homes for Christmas, and it's official. The gap between the haves and the have-nots is getting wider. Don't forget, you can watch us live on Facebook.
RNZ News at 5. Kia ora, good afternoon. Ko Katrina Batanaho. Dunedin residents evacuated from homes threatened by a slip last night will be able to return over the weekend, but just to retrieve more possessions. They won't be able to stay in their homes, and it's unclear when they'll be able to return for good. Timothy Brown reports.
4 homes in the Dunedin suburb of St Clair sit empty after a slip opened up by recent rain events made the houses unsafe. Engineers have assessed the site, but it will be some time before they can report on the extent of the damage. The Dunedin City Council's Community Services General Manager, Simon Pickford, says it's possible the residents won't be able to return to their homes before Christmas. He says agencies are working as fast as possible to establish how bad the slip is and what will be required to address it, but it will take time. In Dunedin, Timothy Brown.
The retailer Noel Leeming has been fined $200,000 by the Commerce Commission for misleading customers. The company was convicted on 8 charges under the Fair Trading Act for making false or misleading representations about consumers' rights. Between 2015 and January 2017, the complainants bought products such as mobile phones, laptops and household appliances at 7 Noel Leeming stores around the country. The Commission found consumers were misled about their rights under the Consumer Guarantees Act to seek remedies for faulty goods such as a refund or replacement. The country's highest court has ruled that a law change in 2010 prohibiting all serving prisoners from voting was lawfully passed. Some prisoners, including Arthur Taylor, took the government to court saying the Electoral Act required 75% of MPs to vote for the measure, and that didn't happen. Anne-Marie May has more details.
Before the law was amended, only those sentenced to life imprisonment, preventive detention or a term of 3 years or longer were prohibited from voting. The appellant sought a High Court declaration that the 2010 voting law amendment was invalid, but that court and the Court of Appeal ruled against them. Today, a majority of the Supreme Court agreed. In a dissenting judgment, the Chief Justice, Dame Sian Elias, would have allowed the appeal because it concerned a fundamental part of voting law and protected the right to vote. This is Anne-Marie May.
A second health union is backing a claim by midwives that government ministers are intervening in pay talks. The midwives union, Maris, is polling members about a new round of strikes over a lack of progress in pay negotiations. It says District Health Board advocates said last week they had a proposal, but the Ministers of Health, Finance, Workplace Relations and State Services vetoed it. That's rejected by the government and DHBs. But the Apex union, representing anaesthetic technicians and others, say it's happened to them too. Their spokesperson, Deborah Powell, says it results in offers that make no sense.
That have not been the subject of bargaining, that have obviously been dreamed up in another room, isolated from the bargaining, and someone else has decided that's what we're going to be offered. Not the district health boards, not the union. What's going on is this is coming from the Ministry of Health under the direction of those 4 ministers.
Dr. Deborah Powell. A rugby union says it's sent reminders to the clubs it governs to store scrum machines properly after a 4-year-old girl died from an accident with one yesterday. The incident happened near the Manurewa rugby club rooms in Mountford Park at about 6:30 yesterday evening. A Manurewa Papakura ward councillor, Daniel Newman, says he understands children were playing with the scrum equipment during a touch rugby program at the time. Matt McCarty from the Auckland Rugby Union says injuries from scrum machines are very rare. The union doesn't govern the club in Manurewa, but Mr McCarty says storing the equipment correctly is important.
We've sent a note out to our clubs today to remind them of the importance of ensuring that the scrum machines are stored correctly, that they're not leant up against the wall with the ability to fall, and preferably stored away in a shed or a container when not in use.
Matt McCarty from the Auckland Rugby Union. A Waikato iwi has initialled its Treaty of Waitangi deed of settlement valued at more than $8 million with the Crown. Ngāti Hinarangi initialled the deed today at a ceremony with Crown officials in Hamilton. The initialled deed of settlement provides for financial redress of $8.1 million and the return of 14 sites of cultural significance. The Treaty Negotiations Minister Andrew Little says Ngāti Hinarangi was left virtually landless by the Crown's actions, which included land confiscation and tauranga. Mr Little says the Ngāti Hinarangi settlement will forge a new relationship between the iwi and the Crown. It's 5 minutes past 5. Sport, and the Silver Ferns coach Nolene Taurua is refusing to say just why former captain Katrina Rore Grant didn't make the squad for the upcoming quad series. Rore, who's played 125 tests for New Zealand, was replaced as captain when Nolene Taurua was appointed coach earlier this year, but remained in the team. However, she's now been dropped for the tournament involving Australia, England and South Africa in Liverpool in the new year. Taurua says not being picked this time doesn't mean she's no longer in contention for the World Cup in July.
She's totally disappointed. She will be back. You know, this opportunity also gives her a possibility of doing other things outside netball and to strengthen that base as well and do those things that sometimes you don't do because you've been involved in international netball.
Nolene Taurua. There are two newcomers in the squad, mid-quarter Kimiora Poi and defender Irena Mikairi, while the former captain, 33-year-old Casey Korpua, is set to play her first game for the side in 3 years. The All Blacks coach Steve Hansen has given Ian Foster the seal of approval as his successor. Hansen announced today he'll be standing down from the job after next year's World Cup, having joined the All Blacks as an assistant in 2004, then taking over from Graham Henry as head coach in 2012. Hansen believes Foster would be a good head coach.
He'd be a great head coach. He's developed as a coach, as a man. He's got some great qualities. His understanding of the game is great, but I don't think it's right that, you know, I sit here and say, well, that guy should do the job or that guy should do the job. I think that's the rugby union's job.
Steve Hansen. New Zealand driver Hayden Paddon has lost his World Rally Championship contract with Hyundai. Paddon only had a part-time drive with Hyundai this year, competing in 7 of the 13 rounds and finishing 8th in the championship. That's the news.
Tonight on Nights, Country Life celebrates the produce of Horowhenua. Lady Six's our Friday Night Live act. Our Something for the Weekend could involve Moana and Spider-Man hanging out in Hamilton Garden. Then again, it might not. And because Auckland had its first A&P show on this day in 1843, we have a sonic tonic dedicated to agriculture. So join me, Brian Crump, just about the time the cows are due home on RNZ National.
Met Service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Horowhenua, Kapiti and Wellington. A few showers, mainly in the afternoons and evenings. Some could be heavy with thunderstorms possible about the ranges. For the remainder of the North Island, also Marlborough, Nelson, Buller and Westland, scattered showers, especially in the afternoons and evenings when some will be heavy with isolated thunderstorms, hail and localised downpours. Some of the thunderstorms may be severe. Canterbury and Otago often cloudy about the coast with patchy drizzle, fine spells inland, but isolated showers this afternoon and evening with the odd thunderstorm possible. Southland and Fiordland, areas of low cloud, morning and night. Otherwise, long fine spells and the odd afternoon or evening shower today, possibly heavy. And for the Chatham Islands, rain developing tonight, then easing to a few showers tomorrow afternoon. It's 8 minutes past 5 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks, Katrina, and I'm Lisa Owen. Steve Hansen says his decision to step down as All Blacks coach after next year's World Cup is the right decision for him, and it's the right decision for the team he's led to new heights. Hansen announced his long-awaited decision this morning, confirming he will leave the role after the team's tilt for a record 3rd consecutive World Cup crown. The 59-year-old will depart having spent 16 years as a member of the All Blacks coaching staff, and success in Japan next year would cap an enormously successful 8 years in charge. Clay Wilson and camera operator Claire Easton-Farrelly with more on why Hansen believes 2019 is the right time to leave the job he loves.
For the 3-time World Rugby Coach of the Year, and a man with a scarcely believable record of 85 wins from 96 matches in charge, in the end, Steve Hansen's decision to stop coaching the All Blacks after next year's Rugby World Cup wasn't a difficult one.
Oh, look, I'd like to coach this team for the rest of my living days, but it's not the right thing to do, so I wouldn't say it's a close call, it's just the right call.
Hansen isn't tired of the immense expectation and pressure. Quite the contrary. But he isn't the only one whom the years of public scrutiny has weighed on, and he believes it's time he repays family for their sacrifice. That, and ensure the All Blacks remain one of world sport's most dominant teams.
It's right for the team to have someone new after this World Cup. I think some fresh eyes, some fresh thinking whether that's within or without side of the, whoever the replacement is, it'll be fresh. So I think that'll be great for the enhancement of the legacy of the jersey, and that's the most important thing.
That sentiment is reflected in Hansen's decision to reveal his future now, so it doesn't become an unnecessary distraction on the team's World Cup quest. New Zealand Rugby Chief Executive Steve Chu, who admits he tried to convince Hansen to stay, says that level of selflessness is one of two major legacies Hansen will leave behind.
The special thing that makes the All Blacks different has just grown. It's deeper, it's more authentic. We still have men that make mistakes occasionally, but largely this group carry themselves outstandingly well, and that's all part of Steve's leadership. But what will be remembered is 2 World Cups to date and 16 Bledisloe Cups, and I can't remember how many Investec Rugby Championships in a winning ratio of nearly 90%. No one in sport does that.
The man himself, though, wasn't in the mood for reflection on his long list of achievements just yet.
The job's not finished. It sounds like if I start doing that, it sounds like I've finished. And I don't want to be finished. I've got 12 months where we've got to do something that, and if we do that, that'll be the most proudest thing, to win 3 in a row.
A treble of World Cups would certainly be a fitting way for Hansen to go out. Whether it would be his last achievement with New Zealand Rugby remains to be seen, with speculation of an advisory role when his coaching tenure ends. The future, beyond next year's tournament in Japan though, was also not up for discussion.
I don't know, so I can't tell you, so don't bother asking, because you'll get that answer. It'll just be I don't know. I'm not focusing on what's next. What I'm focusing on is making sure that we get to next year and we try and retain that Bledisloe Cup, and then try and do something that's not been done before, which is win 3 of these World Cups in a row. So
do that, and Hansen will leave with his reputation with All Black fans at an all-time high. A reputation that, as it stands with most supporters, is already in pretty good health.
Done a fantastic job, really good, top coach, done really, really well. The same issue in reverse, he built on that side that Graham Henry produced and took them to a new level.
I think he's been a great servant to All Black Rugby. I think he may feel it's time for him to step down and let someone else have a crack at it. I'd really be interested to know who his replacement's going to be. Has to be pretty good to replace Steve Hansen.
Given his commitment to leaving the black jersey in a better place, it's an assessment even someone with standards as high as Hansen's should be satisfied with. Moti hotaka otia hipone, ko Clay Wilson aho.
And after 6 tonight, Alex Perrottet looks at who might put their hand up to replace Steve Hansen as All Blacks coach. This week we brought you the story of a beneficiary who says he was treated like a dog by the Ministry of Social Development and left to live on and off in his car, despite being ill with a potentially fatal condition and reliant on a wheelchair at the time. He took his case to the Social Security Appeal Authority and won, meaning MSD has been forced to wipe the $10,000 plus debt it was making him pay back for motel accommodation. The man, who now lives in a Housing NZ property, told Checkpoint he'd like to meet the Deputy Boss of MSD, Viv Rickard, and Social Development Minister Carmel Sepuloni face to face, so they can hear firsthand his concerns about his treatment, the culture in the ministry and the accommodation debt he says that is weighing beneficiaries down. On Tuesday, Mr Rickard said MSD would apologise to the man. We checked with him this morning and that still hadn't happened. So earlier this afternoon, I went looking for Viv Rickard. Hi, Mr Rickard, Lisa Owen from Checkpoint. Hi, I've been talking to your media person, Ruth, we have been, who says that, yes we are, who says that you don't have the number for the gentleman that we've been talking to you about to apologise. So I'm just going to extend the invitation. He's home now, he's willing to host you if you would like to come round and apologise to him directly. We could take you there when you're finished here.
I'm happy to deal with the apology. Thank you for the invitation to go around with you, but I don't need to. Lisa, I don't think that'd be appropriate, actually.
Have you managed to contact him?
Well, we've been trying to contact him. I know from our people that have been trying. I tried, so as I spoke to you the other day.
In what way are you trying to contact?
I think they've been trying to do it by phone, but I think we have got his details. So if our media people have told you that they haven't got these details, I'd be surprised, but we've been trying to contact him. If we need to go around and see him because we can't contact him, we will.
Are you going to give him a personal apology, or I understand from the Minister that a letter has been dispatched to him. Is that sufficient in your view?
Well, as I said to you the other day, the issue that we're dealing with is the fact that the recoverable debt didn't and we made it recoverable. We've dealt with that. We've indicated that we're going to apologise. I've said we've done the wrong thing. I think we can do better, actually. So, and if that means we have to go around to do it because we haven't been able to locate them, we will.
Well, he would welcome the invitation, the opportunity to talk to you directly. He says he's got concerns about the culture within your department, that they still exist. They're not historic concerns, they're the concerns here and now, and also concerns about the way he's treated and the issue of recoverable debt. Would you commit to meeting with him face to face?
Well, I'm not sure if, in terms of the relationship between the clients, I don't want to do that through the media. So I hear what you're saying, but the issue with our clients shouldn't be dealt with through the media, and I'm not going to do that. Sure. You've indicated that you've spoken to him, acting as an advocate as it sounds, and I'd rather us do the apology in the right way, not because the media are forcing, because it's the right thing to do.
Okay, if it's the right thing to do, how come it hasn't happened yet?
Look, we will get around to say sorry to him, and we'll do that genuinely, not because the media are saying you must come around with me on a car. It's because we should actually apologise.
I extended an invitation.
Yeah, and
I've extended an invitation.
Yeah, but I think, to be fair, the invitation is based on the fact that you probably knew that I was going to decline. You're an experienced journalist. But I think we need to apologise to him, and I'm very clear about that.
I hadn't prejudged your response, but if you don't wish to go round, that's your choice. But I'm asking you whether it is sufficient to send a letter in the mail, which is what I've been told you have done to date.
I've made it very clear that we're going to apologise to him. It's not about a letter. We need to make this clear in terms of our previous engagement that we would contact him and speak to him and apologise.
But you won't give a commitment to meet with him, which is what he wants.
Oh, look, if we need to meet with him and if that's going to happen, we'll sort something out. But we will apologise to him. I don't want anybody to be of, concern that we're not going to apologise to him. If we can do that face to face, that would be great. We'll sort out something that works for him. We'll do it when it works for him, and hopefully we can get that done, so it'll be great. We've dealt with a particular issue that was brought to our attention. We've fixed it up. We've apologised.
Haven't apologised yet.
Well, I've apologised to you on radio, and I've indicated what we were going to do, and I understand that you've been dealing with the clients. I'm sure he's heard that apology. But we are going to front up to do that, so that's our focus.
Have you got a time frame to do that?
In terms of dealing with our client, it's about a client that we have. We'll do the apology as quickly as we can, but it's a matter of just organising that works for him and for the organisation, and get the right people around.
But you haven't contacted him yet?
I haven't been able to contact him.
Why?
I've tried, we have not been able to contact him. Well, I have not been able to contact him. I know I have other staff members that are trying. I'm not sure how that's going. But
do you know what manner they've used to contact him?
No, I don't. I don't know all the detail about what all of my staff are doing today, but I can tell you that we've tried. And the key story here, I know this is pointing like we're not contacting our client. This was a good news story about our client that was wrongly dealt with, and I made the decision to fix that up and to write $10,000 worth of debt off. Right?
Mr. Rickard, that's a good story, that one of your clients has to battle for over a year, take it through the appeals process, get a advocacy group to help him with a lawyer in order to get back what he's entitled to. That's a good news story?
No, the good news story is that I've written off the debt,
okay.
Right? I think for this client, remembering, as I spoke to you previously, that I've 5 months in the organisation. The first time I was made aware of it, I looked at it and made the decision very quickly about what we were going to do. That's what you'd expect me to do. There are a lot of things happening in the organisation, trying to do the right thing by clients. It's not always easy. I get that the media and others want to make a story of this, but the key thing is, could we have done better? Yes. Should we fix that up? Yes. Should we apologise? Yes. Are we going to? Yes.
So a few hours after Checkpoint chased up Viv Rickard from MSD and also spoke to the Social Development Minister, there have been developments. The man at the centre of this case got a house call from an MSD branch manager shortly before 4 this afternoon. He says that manager stayed for about half an hour and delivered a letter. 4 paragraphs of the 6-paragraph letter outline the numbers, the debt that's being wiped, what's happening to the repayments that have already been made. 2 lines could be said to resemble an apology. I spoke to the man just before we came to air and asked him had there been any sign that MSD had been trying to contact him earlier, as they had said.
There's been no messages left, no letters from MSD whatsoever.
No note on your door? No note on your door or anything? And so nothing in the mailbox?
Nothing whatsoever.
So there's no evidence that you've seen that they've tried to contact you before this afternoon?
None whatsoever.
And then this afternoon, you say someone turned up?
Approximately half an hour ago, I had an unexpected visitor show up from MSD. It was a branch manager, centre manager from the Onehunga branch. And basically, the nature of his visit was to basically hand over a letter, apology letter, and also in regards to the debts being wiped.
Okay, so I've had a chance to look at this letter, and there is 2 lines in there which are the apology. We recognise that the lengthy process of resolving this appeal would have been difficult for you. The Ministry takes this opportunity to apologise for any inconvenience caused during this period. What do you think of that apology?
Well, it feels as though, once again, I'm not being treated with the respect that I'm due. I don't think there's any compassion being shown whatsoever. It's the usual behaviour from MSD.
And that was the man at the centre of the case that we've been reporting on this week. Checkpoint also caught up with Social Development Minister Carmel Sepuloni, and she says she will consider meeting him face-to-face to discuss his concerns. I also asked her about Labour's pre-election pledge to wipe beneficiaries' emergency housing debt and why that hadn't happened yet.
The legislation is really clear that MSD can only wipe debt where MSD has made a mistake. And so in situations like the one that we're talking about, he absolutely had every right to go for a review of decision, and that was the right decision. He needed to have that debt wiped because that was MSD's fault. And so where
So was that a hollow promise that you made?
No. Where MSD has made a mistake, then debt needs to be wiped. That's what the legislation states.
And that is Social Development Minister Carmel Sepuloni. Now, a reminder, the man's motel accommodation debt started accruing as far back as 2015, was built up under the national government, but he was still required to pay it back and was paying it back under this current government. And figures released in March of this year show that there's close to 480 million still owed by beneficiaries in recoverable grants, and we will keep you posted on whether those meetings come to anything, the request for those meetings. To the French city of Strasbourg now, and 48 hours after he opened fire at a Christmas market, Sharif Shakat has been shot dead by police. 3 people were killed in the attack and 3 others remain critically ill in hospital. The gunman became one of the most wanted men in Europe, with French and German authorities searching for him. The BBC's Gavin Lee is in Strasbourg.
In a late-night raid in a quiet residential suburb of Strasbourg, French police officers ended a 2-day manhunt for the suspected gunman behind the Strasbourg terrorist attacks, shooting Sharif Shakat dead in the road beside tram tracks. It happened in the districts of Neudorf, the same place the gunman was last seen on Tuesday night, following the attack close to the city's Christmas markets, which killed 3 people and injured 12 others. The operation is understood to have started by chance after a tip-off from a woman living in the neighbourhood who'd seen a man acting suspicious in the street and looked injured. The French Interior Minister, Christophe Castanet, told reporters that police then headed to the area and tried to approach the suspect.
At 9 p.m, a team from the Specialised Field Brigade, composed of 3 officers from the National Police, spotted an individual walking on the road. This individual matched the description of the person wanted since Tuesday evening. They arrested him. And as the police intervened to arrest him, he turned around, facing the officers, and started shooting. They then immediately retaliated and neutralised the attacker.
Dozens of people living in the area watched the events unfold from behind the police cordon. Henri Pierre described hearing the gunshots and sudden police activity.
We left McDonald's and I wanted to go home because it was late. But when we arrived at the tram station, we were stopped by the police and we heard gunshots, ta-ta-ta-ta-ta-ta. And we've been stuck here since. I don't know how to get home.
29-year-old Sharif Shakat was born in Strasbourg from an Algerian family and was a known petty criminal convicted 27 times for minor offences. but he's said to have been radicalised in prison and last year was placed on a French terrorism watch list known as the Fichier S list, and amongst thousands of other individuals being monitored for possible extremism. Questions will follow about where errors were made in not realising the deadly threat from Shikat. But for now, life here can return to some normality. The Christmas festivities and markets, the economic lifeblood of the city, will be opened again on Friday. And residents talk of their sheer relief that the manhunt is at an end.
Gavin Lee reporting. The residents of 4 Dunedin homes may have to find somewhere else to spend Christmas after a slip opened up on a nearby hillside, forcing them to evacuate. The half-metre slip was noticed near the homes in the seaside suburb of St Clair yesterday after a number of heavy downpours in the area. Here's Otago Southland reporter Timothy Brown with the story.
Motu Street is even quieter than usual after the occupants of 3 homes were yesterday told to grab their essentials and get out after a slip opened up on a neighbouring Allendale Road home, which was also evacuated. Christmas trees are visible through the windows of some, but it is unlikely the residents will be able to return in time to celebrate the holidays. The Dunedin City Council's Community Services General Manager, Simon Pickford, says it is unclear how long the residents will be out of their homes.
That's a matter for the engineers to decide, but it's, as I say, it's a fairly significant slip. This isn't a minor event, and it seemed to have opened up in that last rain event we had. And from the building records, it seemed like there has been some underpinning of that home before. So this is just obviously worse than that situation and created it again. So we won't be letting anyone back into there until we're 100% sure that the house is safe. Mr. Pickford says the council is offering any support they can to the occupants of the homes. It's obviously very distressing, and we're working with all the parties as quickly as we can, but acknowledging that it may take some time. The council was alerted to the slip by EQC yesterday morning. The slip's quite significant. It's a half a metre crack that's opened up at the back of the house at the top of the hill, and obviously straight away they knew there was going to be an issue, so that's why in terms of safety it was important that we got those people out of their homes. As unfortunate as it is and as disruptive as it is, it's safety first. He says engineers have been at the site today, but it's still no clearer when it will be safe for residents to return. They will be allowed back into the homes briefly over the weekend to get any possessions they need, as the initial evacuation provided little time for them to pack and leave. Claire Stevenson-Brunt, who lives in a neighbouring property, says the news came as a shock for residents.
They literally got told at 4:30 yesterday what was happening by the council, and they had to move out immediately, so take important stuff and then move out straight away. Quite out of the blue, yeah.
She's spoken to some of those evacuated, and their biggest concern is with the security of their homes and possessions.
At the moment the concern is just security of the houses, because they're now vacated. They are in the process of actually moving their possessions out. But there is concern now that the council will kind of provide some sort of security for them.
EQC's Head of Response and Recovery, Robin Nation, says 2 claims have been received so far regarding the slip. An Insurance Council spokesperson says private insurers will only become involved if the houses are damaged. In Dunedin, for Checkpoint, Timothy Brown.
There was shock, delight and tears among the Silver Ferns squad today as coach Nolene Taurua announced her squad of 12 to contest next month's quad series in England. Veteran netballer Casey Korpua, who announced her retirement last year, was reduced to tears after being named in the squad along with 2 other new mums. But as Ravinda Hunia reports, it was the omission of former captain Katrina Grant, also one of Korpua's best friends, that sent shockwaves through the squad.
It was an emotional announcement for the Silver Ferns, with some realising their hard work during this week's gruelling camp had paid off, while others were left shell-shocked. Former Silver Ferns captain Casey Korpua made the roster as one of 4 defenders and was brought to tears after a demanding week.
It is pretty cool, and speaking to my family, I guess they see the other side too of all the hard work and the choices that you make. And I guess just to hear them say that they're proud, for me, is big.
Korpua announced her retirement in March last year and hasn't featured in an international match since 2015. The 33-year-old battled injuries this domestic season, but when it counted, did enough to impress coach Nolene Taurua.
There's areas that's going to change and has presented opportunities for others. Casey Korpua has come back into the mix again. Physically, obviously, she was away for the last couple of series because of injury, but now having her presence back in there, and I'm really excited by what she can bring.
It's a bittersweet return though. Her inclusion came at the cost of a place for former teammate Katrina Grant. Grant featured in every match during the recent Constellation Cup and Netball Quad Series under Taurua, and that's proved a hard pill for Korpua to swallow.
Part of the emotion, having one of your best friends, with you, not with you, is going to be tough, but I love her no matter what, whether she's in or out. So, I hope that we as a group and as a collective can do her proud as well, and that just because she isn't here now doesn't mean that she can't be here later.
Learning today that the Silver Ferns have reclaimed second place in the world's rankings, Taurua makes no apologies for her decision and feels Grant's exclusion is what's best for an evolving squad.
We were very clear to all the players, all the franchises, as to the expectation, and that we're not going to be bogged down by history or who you are or who you're not. We need everybody on board, even though there will be people that would be disappointed. I think everybody would still go away feeling quite inspired, knowing that we all have contributed.
Korpua, who has a 2-year-old daughter, joins an elite group within the newly named squad, becoming one of 3 mothers in the Silver Ferns, along with Erena Mikaere and Amelia Ann Ignasio.
Having a child puts things into perspective as well, and what's important and who you are and that sort of thing. I guess to share that with others. It can be stressful, but just being able to relate to somebody else while you're away, have those chats and just feel comfortable, I guess, that somebody else is in the same boat as you.
The Silver Ferns leave for the UK on January 7th, where they will play England, South Africa and Australia. Their first game against the hosts is January 13th. Mo te hōtaka o te pō nei, ko Ravinda Hunia aho.
Coming up, we'll go live to Mountford Park in Manurewa, where a karakia is about to get underway in memory of a 4-year-old girl who died last night after an accident involving a scrum machine. A passenger rail service between Auckland and Hamilton is one step closer to reality. And just who will put their hand up to replace All Blacks coach Steve Hansen? We'd love to know who you think it should be. You can text us on 2101. You can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, Facebook us Checkpoint, or email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. But first, here's Katrina Batten with the headlines.
People evacuated from their homes in the Dunedin suburb of St Clair may not be home in time for Christmas. Last night, residents from 4 homes were evacuated after being threatened by a slip. They'll be able to return over the weekend, but just to retrieve their possessions. The Supreme Court has ruled that a law change in 2010 preventing all serving prisoners from voting was lawfully passed. The appellants, who included Arthur Taylor, took the government to court, saying the amendment was invalid because the Electoral Act required a 75% majority. Today's ruling had one dissenting voice, the Chief Justice, Dame Sian Elias, who would have allowed the appeal because it concerned a fundamental part of voting law and protected the right to vote. Tests have confirmed that a patient admitted to Palmerston North Hospital this week with meningococcal disease has the same deadly strain affecting Northland. Some Northland children and teenagers are being given free immunisation against the MenW strain to avert a major outbreak. The DHB is offering vaccinations to close contacts of the patient, who has now been transferred to Auckland's Starship Hospital. A union for health workers is backing midwives' claims of government interference in pay talks. The midwives' union, Maris, is polling members about a new round of strikes over a lack of progress in pay negotiations. It says District Health Board advocates said last week they had a proposal, but it was vetoed by the Ministers of Health, Finance, Workplace Relations and State Services. Deborah Powell, who's a spokesperson for the Apex union, says the interference results in offers that make no sense. The retailer Noel Leeming has been fined $200,000 after being convicted on 8 charges under the Fair Trading Act for making false or misleading representations about consumers' rights. An investigation by the Commerce Commission found consumers who bought mobile phones, laptops and household appliances at 7 Noel Leeming stores around the country were misled about their rights to get a replacement or refund for faulty goods. Those are the headlines. I'm back at 6 o'clock.
Thanks, Katrina. The rich are getting richer while the poorest are stuck at the bottom. New official data shows the net worth of the richest 20% of households has gone up nearly $400,000, hitting a median of $1.75 million. Meanwhile, the net worth of the bottom 40% hasn't increased. Laura Dooney reports.
The gap between the haves and the have-nots is getting wider. Statistics New Zealand spokesman Jason Attiwell explains what the numbers tell us about the richest of New Zealand households.
Their net worth rose by nearly $400,000 to reach a median of $1.75 million. It's also showing us about inequality and distribution of net worth, and what we've also seen is that as a proportion of the total, the poorest 40%, their proportion remains about the same. So the rich are getting richer.
Meanwhile, the poorest 40% of the country are not getting any wealthier, and the pinch always comes at Christmas time. Christchurch City Missioner Matthew Mark says this Christmas there's been a 45% increase in the number of people coming in for food compared with the same time last year. He says most of the people in that 45% are working families.
So you might have a two-income household on either low-skilled or minimum wage, and they're just struggling to make ends meet.
Statistics New Zealand says the median household net worth has increased $51,000, but this mainly reflects rising property values. Jason Attiwell explains.
For most New Zealanders, their main asset is the house that they live in, so property price increases have a big impact on net worth, and that's what we've seen. So it's grown from $289,000 to $340,000 in the last 3 years, and that's mainly driven by increasing property prices.
Matthew Mark says those rising property values are bad news for the people his organisation helps.
As property prices increase, and the reality is that's the market that we're in at the moment, anyone who's purchasing a property from an investment perspective wants to get a return that's going to justify their investment. And so by default raises rents in the year. So most of the people that we're dealing with are renters in our market.
Mr Mark says there are some things that can be done to address financial inequality, such as income-related rents and making sure people are paid a fair wage, but it's a big challenge. Wage inequality expert Max Rashbrook says today's figures help support the case for a capital gains tax to help make things more fair.
A lot of this increase in wealth, particularly for people at the upper end, has come through increases in property values. If you're just sitting on a house and it's appreciating in value, you're not really working for it. Whereas conversely, of course, if you're working and you're paid a salary, then you pay tax on every cent of that salary.
And Mr Rashbrook says generally, for those at the bottom of the wealth pile, the situation is getting worse.
There's a lot of people, and the poorest tenth of New Zealanders are all in net debt. So they owe far more than they own. That's a pretty crushing weight around a lot of people's necks. Their situation has generally been getting worse over the last couple of decades.
Max Rashbrook says many New Zealanders think of the country being egalitarian, but that's not the case. For Checkpoint, call Laura Dooney, tēnei.
And time for business now with Nona Palsier. Nona, the Reserve Bank. So it's suggesting that the banks hold more capital in reserve?
Yeah, they're wanting the banks to keep more of their funds aside for that rainy day, but actually not a rainy day, much more like a storm, the kind of a flood that you would see every 200 years. So they're saying, look, we are vulnerable to economic shock. The banks haven't been holding enough in reserve. We think that they should hold more. What they're proposing is a lot more, and it's going to cost consumers and it's going to cost shareholders. Now, the idea is to make the economy more resilient. So the banks, the Reserve Bank is all about financial stability, monetary policy. So they want the banks to hold more money in reserve. They're going to say, keep more of your profits aside over the next 5 years. That's not going to make shareholders happy, and our dollar dropped about 0.5 cent as a result. Now, I spoke with the Massey School Business School Director, Claire Matthews, and she said she had a quick look at the proposal, and she thought the bank might be overly conservative. This is what she had to say.
It's not a sign that there's any problem imminent. It's simply the Reserve Bank taking steps to ensure that we do have a sound economy and a sound financial system that will be able to continue to operate and to avoid potential issues that could arise otherwise.
And even if that only occurs once every 200 years.
Yeah, well, it's a bit like a 1 in 200 year flood. It might only happen once every 200 years, but if it happens, it's pretty disastrous, and therefore that's why you want to avoid it. If we have a banking crisis, the reality is it would cause a lot of pain for a lot of people, and therefore doing things to avoid it is really, really worthwhile.
And that's Massey Business School Director Claire Matthews. One of the things that did come out was the Bankers Association. Everyone's really digesting this document. And they said, look, the banks are already holding enough capital to survive a 40% drop in household prices.
40%.
Not rather household prices, house prices.
House prices. Yes, right. I got what you meant.
Yeah, 40% drop. Claire says, well, yes, but if that happened, there'd be other costs, so watch out.
So, and speaking of houses and house prices, so the trend is still going up, is it?
Yeah, so it's mixed actually. In Auckland, prices are still on the down, and also in Christchurch to some extent. They're marginal drops, but they're not. It's not on the plus side. Where we are seeing growth is out in the regions, and Wellington is still doing really well, double-digit growth there. And
are you classifying Wellington as a region, Nona?
No, I'm talking about the region of Wellington.
Okay.
I don't mean Wellington as a city.
Yeah.
Sorry. So the region. Yeah, we're talking about regionals. Yeah,
so we're taking the more rural areas as well.
Yeah, it would be more than just Wellington. It'd be the Wellington region.
Because I was going to say, we're about to get a flood of texts about that.
No, I didn't mean it as a city. And I wasn't talking about Auckland as a city either.
Right.
I'm talking about the Auckland region. These are regional differences. And so, just so anybody is... And the regions that were doing well were like, for example, the Hawke's Bay, Tasman, Southland, Waikato, Northland. So there's a lot of regions that are doing very well, but the Auckland region not so much. And we're still having issues with Christchurch there. So it's making it more difficult for first-time home buyers to get into the market because those prices are still, moving ahead of them. The Kiwi Bill may help, but the basic bottom line is that we still don't have enough houses available in the market. So prices will still be under pressure.
Rest of the markets?
Interesting. We had another takeover offer today. Yeah, for Methvin, which is a tap maker. I don't know if people know about this company. Yeah, they make showerware, bathware, that kind of stuff. Anyway, look, they have an offer from a company in Australia for $1.65 a share. It works out to about $1.65 a share. They're going to do it through a scheme of arrangement. A scheme of arrangement's different than something that's done under the takeover code. So it's more friendly and there's cooperation and that sort of thing. It's a little different. The rules are different. So anyways, this would be a scheme of arrangement. The details would be made to shareholders for a vote potentially, I guess, in April. That saw Methvin's share price rise 32% by 37 cents to $1.52. Now, the offer is $1.65. That values the company at just over $120 million. And it had been cheap for a while because they had some trouble over some time and the price has been somewhat depressed. So this would have been a big, big bonus for shareholders today, for certain. Anyway, our dollar, though, as I said, dropped to half a cent because of what happened with the RBNZ talking about capital reserve. So we were at 67.9 US cents, 94.5 and 94.5 Australian, 53.8 pence. Now, the top 50 index fell, so that's quite a remarkable thing against that Methvin rise. 0.8%, 71 points down to 8,723, and that's really still because those fresh wounds with the trade talks and all sorts.
It rumbles
it just will not leave the markets alone. No.
Thanks, Nona. Have a fantastic weekend. Labour campaigned on a passenger rail service between Auckland and Hamilton, and now it is a step closer to becoming a reality. But it's not the government spearheading a new commuter service, but rather 3 Waikato councils, which together proposed a funding model to the Transport Agency. The agency's board is meeting today to consider that proposal, and it's expected to be approved. As Andrew McKay reports, there's already strong support for the service.
Passengers in Hamilton wanting to go to Auckland would have the option of 2 services, one likely leaving in the morning at 6:30, the other an hour later, and 2 return journeys early evening. On the streets of Hamilton, people are excited about the prospect.
I think it's a very good idea. I think if it takes people right through to central Auckland, drops them off there, and picks them up there, of course, on the way back, that'll be really convenient for a lot of people in Hamilton working in Auckland.
What's going to happen first, though, is you're only going to get as far as Papakura and then change lines to direct into the town.
Doesn't sound so great, but if it worked, if the connectivity worked, reasonably well, it'd be okay, yeah.
I think it's a wonderful idea. We'd use it to go up to theatre and not have to worry about parking. Wonderful idea.
Wouldn't be stressed out on the road there too, is another thing, like you could ride there safely, nice and comfortable too, you wouldn't have to be behind the wheel there. No, I see the point, yeah.
It's a shocker, the traffic is a shocker, and no, I think the train would be an excellent idea if the trains could run it, on time and probably more than 25k an hour.
Hamilton's Mayor Andrew King says the commuter rail service to Auckland fits in nicely with development plans for what's known as the Waikato Growth Corridor running between the two cities.
This train's only the beginning. This train will build, this train will get faster, and there is even talk of a fast train between Auckland and Hamilton on the cards, on top of this, what I call a milk train, which is a slow train.
The rail commute from Hamilton to central Auckland is expected to take 2.25 hours, and while slow, it's faster than going by car in peak traffic. Susan Trotton from the lobby group Tron, the Rail Opportunity Network, says with a return trip likely to be under $30, it'll be a bargain for commuters.
So one of the pieces of opposition we've seen is, for $150 a week, it must be a very good job for somebody to be going and spending that amount of money, and that's true. But what that doesn't take into account is if you're spending $150 on petrol and you've got lost productivity for, let's say, on a good day, 4 hours a day, so it's 20 hours a week of your time.
The Public Transport Users Association says any decision on a Hamilton to Auckland commuter rail service should be held off until the trains can be guaranteed a direct link into central Auckland. The proposals for the service to end at Papakura and for passengers to transfer onto Auckland City services. PTUA National Coordinator John Reeves says everything needs to be done to make a commuter service fast and efficient.
So we need to be as attractive as possible against a private motor vehicle. And a train that terminates at Papakura and then Damanjabin gets into the all-stop commuter network may not be seen as optimal as driving in a car.
Mr Reeves says rushing the implementation of the service could ultimately see it fail.
Ideally, I'd like to see a big funding announcement saying that the track will be upgraded, the third and fourth lines will be built, and that the trains to Hamilton will come in at the timetabled point once those are complete. So we have a perfect service from day one.
Susan Trotton from Tron says while a direct service to central Auckland is the dream, changing at Papakura does have its advantages.
Obviously, there's interchanges all the way along that line, and Newmarket, you can jump off and get on in the other direction if you want to. Get to Britomart, the City Rail link will be going as well, and so you'll be able to get eventually wherever you want.
Hamilton Mayor Andrew King rejects the suggestion by some that the proposal's being rushed.
Look, if we'd waited for the new highway between Auckland and Hamilton to happen and hadn't ever put in a road in the first place 100 years ago, which hasn't been improved on, build on what you've got. The way that I see it is that people spend half their day working on their laptops, and those 2 hours to go up to Auckland and those 2 hours back again each day is time out where people can catch up on all their laptop and PC type work.
Mr King says the business case is sound for the proposal and it has the backing of Waikato councils and government support, so he'd be very surprised if the Transport Agency doesn't approve funding. It's expected to be funded by the agency's Road Transport Fund and Waikato Regional, District and Hamilton City Councils. It's likely the Transport Agency will announce its decision on funding the service sometime next week. In Hamilton for Checkpoint, Ko Andrew McRae-Tene.
Theresa May has been back in Brussels telling EU leaders the Brexit withdrawal deal they have negotiated with the UK is at risk if MPs' concerns can't be addressed. She met the Irish Prime Minister and the President of the European Council before an EU summit. EU leaders continue to insist the withdrawal deal can't be renegotiated, but say some points can be clarified. In particular, Mrs May wants the EU states to calm Tory MPs' concerns about the nature of the so-called backstop, the fallback plan to avoid building a solid border between Ireland and Northern Ireland. The BBC's Kevin Conley reports from Brussels.
The Prime Minister turned up to Brussels in the mood to manage expectations of what might be possible at this summit. On her way into the meeting, where she was to appeal directly to her fellow EU leaders for concessions to help her sell her deal at Westminster, her message was that there's plenty of work still to be done.
I recognise the strength of concern in the House of Commons, and that's what I will be putting to colleagues today. I don't expect an immediate breakthrough, but what I do hope is that we can start to work as quickly as possible on the assurances that are necessary.
The text of Mrs May's appeal, though, released after the evening's talks ended, hinted at a rather passionate and personal address. Let's get this right, she was reported to have told her fellow leaders. Let's hold nothing in reserve. She stressed that a no-deal Brexit was in no one's interests and said she hoped she'd proved that they could trust her to do what was right, not what was easy. She told the leaders that they had to change the perception that the Irish border backstop was a trap from which the UK couldn't escape. The EU leaders' formal response was to emphasise the backstop's temporary nature. But the President of the European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, warned that Westminster was not the only parliament whose approval was required.
I would like to tell our British friends that, of course, we need the yes of the House of Commons, but we need also the yes of the European Parliament. Both parliaments are important. The one is continental, the other is insular, but the two have the same importance.
So far, at least, there's nothing in that public response from the EU that answers Theresa May's call for help. But this negotiation is, of course, not finished yet.
And that's Kevin Conley reporting. The death of a 4-year-old girl in an incident with a rugby scrum machine is being described as a tragedy. The accident happened near the Manurewa rugby club rooms in Mountford Park yesterday evening while her family was present. Her death comes 9 years after former All Black Kevin Mialamu's 6-year-old niece died after being crushed by a scrum machine. Jessie Chang reports.
It's quiet and peaceful, with very few people around the fields at Mountford Park in Manurewa today. It's hard to imagine that less than 24 hours ago, tragedy struck a preschooler here. A Manurewa Papakura ward councillor, Daniel Newman, says he understands children were playing with the scrum equipment during a touch rugby program at the time of the incident. He's been talking with the rugby club and everyone is devastated.
The immediate thing right now is to assist the police to establish precisely what has happened. Every effort is being made to assist and cooperate with the police to complete their inquiries. And then we need to obviously move to provide support to the grieving family.
The police say the 4-year-old's family were present when the incident occurred at about 6:30 last night. Donnie Rihari, who is a regular user of the fields at the park, says he sees children in the area all the time.
This area is a really nice area. I know we have our label of South Auckland and stuff, but especially around Mountford Park, it's a good place for the community. So I just work across the field at the gym, Manurewa, and all kids of all ages, they use this park well. So to hear that happened, yeah, it's a real tragedy.
The Auckland Rugby Union says usually scrum machines are very safe. Its head of operations and facilities, Matt McCarty, says injuries aren't common.
We have obviously injuries from playing the game on the field or at training, but nothing involving machinery as such like this. So it's very rare.
However, in 2009, All Black Kevin Mialamu's 6-year-old niece Christina died after a scrum machine at Tamaki College toppled over and crushed her against the ground. And while the Auckland Rugby Union doesn't govern the club in Manurewa, Matt McCarty says it has notified the 17 clubs it does oversee about storing their scrum machines properly.
That they're not leant up against a wall with the ability to fall, and preferably stored away in a shed or a container when not in use.
A member of the Manurewa Rugby Club who was at its premises today declined to speak to RNZ, and the county's Manukau Rugby Football Union, which governs the club, did not respond to requests for comment. Mo te hōtaka o te ahi nei, ko Jessie Chang tēnei.
And joining us now live from Mountford Park in Manurewa is our reporter Nita Blake-Person. Nita, tell us what's happening there at the moment.
Kia ora, Lisa. Well, there's about 100 people who've gathered
at the football fields here tonight, where there's no rugby taking place. League has been cancelled as out of respect for this young child who died here last night. So the group is gathered kind of under the oak tree. If you know the area well, it's near the James Cook High School. A karakia was said around 5:30 this evening, and the site was blessed. A kaumātua said it was about honouring the Waitangi of the young child who passed away here last night. And people have sung, gathered with bouquets of flowers. There's children, older members of the community, a broad range of people. It's a pretty sombre mood, a really sad occasion, obviously, but everyone has banded together to be here tonight.
And other speakers, I understand Louisa Wall has been there this evening?
That's right, yes, she's just been speaking. The Labour MP, Louisa Wall, has said that the community stands together through this awful tragedy, that very much everyone's come here tonight out of love and respect for the whānau affected. She is calling for people to be vigilant, to keep a really close eye on their children, and says obviously they'll be working hard to uncover what has happened in this tragic set of circumstances. No blame or anything like that, just understanding what's happened so that it can never happen again. As she said, it's a real tragedy, and there's lots of support for the family and those affected should they need it. A lot of people were here at the rugby grounds last night, I understand, when the incident happened, so a lot still shaken by this awful event.
Thank you very much. That is Nita Blake-Person joining us there live from a Mountain Park in Manurewa, where there is, well, a gathering in a karakia this evening for the young child who died there last night. New research published across the Tasman shows that up to 92% of some shark species have been lost in Australian waters in the last 5 decades. Many of them are so-called apex predators and are key to a balanced marine ecosystem. Experts suspect overfishing and culling sharks to protect humans are to blame. The ABC's George Roberts reports.
A 33-year-old man has died after a shark attack in North Queensland.
It hasn't reached peak swimming season yet.
Good evening to breaking news. And 2 people are tonight in the fight of their lives, attacked by a shark in the very same harbour.
But a series of high-profile attacks off Queensland and New South Wales lately may give the impression shark numbers are on the rise.
A surfer has suffered severe leg injuries in a shark attack on the New South Wales mid-north coast.
But the facts prove otherwise. Dr Roff is from the University of Queensland.
The results are quite striking. So what we found over the last 50 years is a dramatic decline in the numbers of apex sharks on the Queensland coastline. So the number of large sharks on our beaches have declined by between 74% and 92%, but at the same time, the size of the sharks are also getting smaller. So there are fewer and smaller sharks on Queensland beaches than there were 50 years ago. This includes the globally endangered hammerhead sharks that have declined by up to 92%. And importantly, white sharks that are listed as vulnerable in Australia have shown no sign of recovery since, despite protections that have been put in place over 2 decades ago to stop fishing.
What do you think is behind this decline?
We think it's strongly linked to targeting of sharks in recreational and commercial fisheries, also in bycatch and commercial fisheries. And again, the shark control programs in Queensland and New South Wales are removing large individuals from the waters.
So do there need to be better protections for sharks?
We think there's better ways of making people safer on Queensland beaches than old-fashioned blunt tools and methods such as shark control programs that use baited drum lines and nets to keep people safe.
He and his co-author, Dr Chris Brown from Griffith University, found that so-called control methods have seen tens of thousands of sharks killed.
So they've obviously removed a lot of sharks, 55,000 sharks over the last 50 years or so. So that could be affecting their abundances.
That's a phenomenal amount, isn't it?
Yeah, over the years, yeah.
And are those shark numbers likely to recover?
Well, we're not seeing any evidence of recoveries at the moment. So this has been an ongoing decline for about 50 years now across all these different species.
They say baited drum lines and other deadly methods should be replaced with newer technologies. Dr Roff again.
There's no evidence really to suggest that shark culls work, and similarly with shark control programs, there's no particular scientific evidence to show that when you decrease shark populations, you decrease the likelihood of having shark attacks on our Queensland beaches. New South Wales have been leading the way with implementing smart technology in the form of drones that will sit on top of the beaches and actively spot for sharks, and clever boys that sit within the water and they use sonar to detect sharks coming into the beaches where there are beachgoers. And if we can implement modern technology and smart technology like New South Wales has done, we can have safe beaches in Queensland and still have large sharks roaming our coastlines.
And that's Queensland University's Dr. George Roff ending that report from the ABC. Time now for some of your feedback. Just on our earlier story about the case of a beneficiary who has won the right to have his debt cleared for emergency accommodation. It was about $10,000. I interviewed Viv Rickard from MSD. This texter says, he basically wants me to stop unnecessarily hounding Mr. Rickard, and says that he's answered my questions fairly. It's boring now, he says, and I've forgotten what the cause is. Thanks for your feedback. Another one here from Tony, who says, thank you for your tenacity. So we have broad spectrum of views on that story this evening. Another one from Simon saying Labour's Carmel Sepuloni refuses to acknowledge that virtually all debt repayment is grossly unjust and needs a review. And that Wins, Simon says, needs an overhaul. This is about the issue of accrued debts that need to be paid back. That was mainly under the national government, but the debts are still carried by beneficiaries. And on a totally different topic regarding Steve Hansen, this person's been in touch now that Steve Hansen has declared his hand, leaving after the next World Cup. Mike says a legacy that has not yet been discussed is how Hansen has made the ABs play entertaining rugby. Thanks, Mike. Time for the news now.
RNZ News at 6. Ngā mihi nui, good evening. Ko Katrina Batten tēnei. Tests have confirmed that the young patient admitted to Palmerston North Hospital this week with meningococcal disease has contracted the same deadly strain behind the outbreak in Northland. Some Northland children and teenagers have been given free jabs to protect against the Men W strain to avert a bigger outbreak. The Mid-Central Medical Officer of Health, Robert Weir, says the DHB is following up people who may have been in contact with the Palmerston North patient. He says vaccinations are being offered to close contacts. The patient has been since transferred to Starship Children's Hospital in Auckland. The retailer Noel Leeming has been fined $200,000 for misleading customers. The company was convicted on 8 charges under the Fair Trading Act for making false or misleading representations about consumers' rights. Katie Scotcher reports.
Between 2015 and January 2017, the complainants bought products such as mobile phones, laptops and household appliances at 7 Noel Leeming stores around the country. An investigation by the Commerce Commission found consumers were misled about their rights under the Consumer Guarantees Act to seek remedies for faulty goods such as a refund or replacement. A Noel Leeming spokesperson says changes have been made to their processes and policies to ensure they comply with the Act. Ko Katie Scotcher aho.
Dunedin residents evacuated from homes threatened by a slip last night may not be allowed to return for good before Christmas. They'll be allowed access over the weekend, but just to retrieve more possessions. 4 homes in the Dunedin seaside suburb of St Clair sit empty after a slip opened up by recent rain events made the houses unsafe. Engineers have assessed the site, but it will be some time before they can report on the extent of the damage. The Dunedin City Council's Community Services General Manager Simon Pickford says it's unclear when the residents will be able to return for good. He says agencies are working as fast as possible to establish how bad the slip is and what will be required to address it. A researcher says figures out today showing the rich are getting richer while the poor stand still point to the need for a capital gains tax. The Statistics New Zealand figures showed the net wealth of the richest 20% of households has increased by $400,000 in the past 3 years. The typical household median wealth also rose, but the net worth of the bottom 40% hasn't changed. Max Rashbrook says a lot of the increase in wealth has come through rising property values.
If you're just sitting on a house and it's appreciating in value, you're not really working for it. Whereas conversely, of course, if you're working and you're paid a salary, then you pay tax on every cent of that salary.
Max Rashbrook says the financial situation for the poorest people is getting worse. China has confirmed it has detained a second Canadian citizen in a move that threatens to escalate the diplomatic dispute between the two nations. The rift was sparked by the arrest in Vancouver of a senior executive from the Chinese phone company Huawei. She's fighting extradition to the US. China's Ministry of Foreign Affairs has confirmed that Canadians Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig are now in custody and under investigation. The CBC's Katie Simpson reports.
China's state-run media published a video editorial threatening Ottawa, saying Beijing will take revenge if the CFO of Huawei is not released. And China's ambassador to Canada wrote an editorial in the Globe and Mail saying the Chinese impression of Canada has chilled. Canadian travel warnings to China have not been increased, and Canada's tourism minister says she still plans to go to China next week to celebrate the year of Canada-China tourism.
Katie Simpson in Ottawa. The Mayor of Hamilton is backing a plan to start a commuter train service between his city and Auckland. A funding proposal is before the Transport Agency's board, which has been meeting today. The service, which would start in early 2020, will involve 2 return trips a day. Andrew King says a daily rail service will be just the beginning of better links between the 2 cities.
This train will build, this train will get faster, and there is even talk of a fast train between Auckland and Hamilton on the card. I just see it as hugely exciting. I'm not saying that it's the best service in the world, but it's another form of transport that we need to develop.
Andrew King rejects the suggestion by some that the proposal is being rushed. It's 6:05. Sport. The All Blacks coach Steve Hansen says a fresh pair of eyes is needed to keep the side on top of World Rugby. The 8 years as head coach, Hansen will quit after next year's World Cup in Japan, ending an era of unmatched dominance. The 59-year-old has spent the past 16 years with the side, having joined the team management under Sir Graham Henry in 2003. He took over as head coach in 2012 and fashioned an unrivalled record in the professional era, with the All Blacks having won 85 of their 96 games during his tenure so far.
I took over in 12 and it was a fresh pair of eyes who'd been in there for a wee while. Now, whether that happens or whether they get someone from outside, I don't know, but they'll be fresh. They'll be different, and they'll bring something different to the table, and hopefully that enhances the team to go to an even higher level, and that's what we want.
Steve Hansen, we'll miss you on the radio, Shag. It's a bittersweet return for defender Casey Korpua, who at 33 years old is back in the Silver Ferns, but missing long-time teammate Katrina Rore, knee Grant. Rore, who's played 125 tests for the Silver Ferns, wasn't picked in the 12-strong squad to compete at the Quad Series in Liverpool in the new year. Korpua is helping Rore come to terms with her axing.
She is one of my best friends, and we were roommates this week, so when we found out, that was pretty tough, but I love her no matter what, and she's an outstanding athlete. She's the fittest, that she's ever been, and it will be different. I will definitely be texting and communicating with her while I'm away as well, just to have that little bit of extra from her.
Casey Korpua. And Australia's 66 for none at lunch on the opening day of the second cricket test against India in Perth. That's the news.
Tomorrow morning, Australian Muslim leader Mohammed Abdullah, who helped establish Islamic studies as an academic discipline. Mike Murphy is a Cambridge University scientist who made his big breakthrough at Otago University in his specialist area of mitochondria. Matt Preston from MasterChef Australia is here. And the big end-of-year book chat with Kate de Goldie and Laura Croach. Join me, Kim Hill, tomorrow morning from 8 on RNZ National.
Met service weather through to midnight tomorrow. Horowhenua, Kapiti and Wellington. A few showers mainly in the afternoons and evenings. Some could be heavy with thunderstorms possible about the ranges. For the remainder of the North Island, also Marlborough, Nelson, Buller and Westland. Scattered showers, especially in the afternoons and evenings, when some will be heavy with isolated thunderstorms, hail and localised downpours. Some of the thunderstorms may be severe. Canterbury and Otago, often cloudy about the coast with patchy drizzle. Fine spells inland, but isolated showers this afternoon and evening with the odd thunderstorm possible. Southland and Fiordland, areas of low cloud morning and night. Otherwise, long fine spells and the odd afternoon or evening shower today, possibly heavy. And for the Chatham Islands, rain developing tonight, then easing to a few showers tomorrow afternoon. It's exactly 6:08 and you're listening to Checkpoint.
Thanks, Katrina. And I'm Lisa Owen. One of New Zealand's most high-profile jobs will open for applications next year, with All Blacks coach Steve Hansen announcing that he will retire after the 2019 Rugby World Cup. The veteran All Blacks coach, who has won 16 Bledisloe Cups and 2 Rugby World Cups, announced this morning he'll retire, but only after trying for a third consecutive World Cup crown. So who will succeed him? Alex Perrottet put on his recruitment hat and went headhunting.
They're pretty big boots to fill. Steve Hansen has the best coaching record, but he thinks the New Zealand Rugby Union shouldn't be just looking at records when finding his replacement.
You know, I got both records. You know, I lost the most tests in a row and I've won the most tests in a row. So I'm either one day I'm a poor coach or another day I'm a great coach. And things change and evolve, and you know, everyone said that, oh, that Rugby Union are taking a massive risk and giving me the job. And they did.
When the news broke that Steve Hansen will step down, this was the reaction on the streets of Auckland.
Warren Gatland might be a good chat from Wales, but I don't know how that would be received here. I'm visiting from the UK. I'm a New Zealander that lives in the UK.
No, because I don't want to replace
Warren Gatland, who has coached Wales since 2007 and the British and Irish Lions since 2009, has been tipped as a future All Blacks coach, particularly following last year's Lions tour of New Zealand, which ended in a tied series against the All Blacks. Kiwi Joe Schmidt, who cleaned up at this year's World Rugby Awards, propelling Ireland into the second position in the world rankings, recently made it clear he wasn't interested. Canterbury Crusaders coach Scott Robertson hinted he was interested in the job, but he hasn't been taking calls. The man Steve Hansen replaced, Sir Graham Henry, retired after his success at the 2011 World Cup. He says any of them could do the job.
I think there's a number of people who can do that, and I'm not going to tell you who I think it is. I don't think that's fair. So I think New Zealand Rugby is very lucky that they've got a number of coaches who could do the job.
Steve Hansen appeared to endorse his assistant coach Ian Foster, but stopped short of giving a full anointing.
Oh, look, I think he'd be a great head coach. He's developed, you know, as a coach, as a man. He's got some great qualities. His understanding of the game is great, but I don't think it's right that you know, I sit here and say, well, that guy should do the job or that guy should do the job. I think that's the rugby union's job.
Graham Henry seems to be on the same page.
Well, he's obviously a very good coach, and he's been there with Steve for a long time, so he'll be one of the strong contenders for sure.
But not all are convinced the former Waikato Chiefs coach has what it takes. Former All Black and All Blacks coach Laurie Mains says others like former Waikato Chiefs coach and current coach of Glasgow Warriors Dave Rennie have kicked more goals.
His record with the Chiefs, you know, didn't compare with Dave Rennie's. So all of those things, I guess, there's a big difference between being an assistant coach and being a coach. And, you know, when all of that's taken into account, you know, it's an interesting scenario.
Laurie Mains says the New Zealand Rugby Union is spoilt for choice.
You've got people like Dave Rennie and Jamie Joseph who have won super titles. You've got Scott Robertson from Canterbury, who, you know, maybe he's a little bit short of experience, but, you know, his day will come.
Voices have even pitched in from across the ditch, with former Wallaby captain Nick Farr-Jones praising the depth of talent.
I think you guys have got plenty of candidates. I know the depth of talent in that small little country of yours, and you've got people, you know, coming out of your ears that could fill that job. I suspect you guys are too clever to give it to a non-New Zealander, so I think it'll come from within your two islands.
Ian Foster is described by some as the greatest New Zealand Rugby Union player to have never played for the All Blacks. He declined to make any comment today, saying he'll let Steve Hansen have his moment, but he might spend his Christmas holiday dusting off his CV and eyeing arguably the greatest prize in international rugby coaching. For Checkpoint, Alex Perrottet.
The 2014 shooting at the Ashburton Work and Income Office left 2 staff members dead and highlighted serious shortcomings with the Ministry of Social Development's security measures. More than 4 years later, the first fully refitted Work and Income Office, complete with new security features, is open for business in Otara in South Auckland. The Ministry says the changes will keep both staff and clients safe. Our social issues reporter Sarah Robson went to check it out.
As you walk into the Otara Work and Income Office, you're greeted by 2 friendly security guards. Inside, there's a big reception desk straight ahead. Over to the left, there's a water cooler and bathrooms for clients to use. To the right, computer stations and a play area for kids. The furniture is new and brightly coloured, and there are plants dotted around the open plan office. The Social Development Minister, Carmel Sepuloni, says these are just a few of the simple changes they're making to make Work and Income a nicer place to visit.
I've always felt that if people feel like this was a warm and welcoming environment, then you're less likely to have someone's behaviour escalate in a negative way.
After the shooting, the ministry was convicted of breaching health and safety laws, and a review highlighted the need for stronger security at all work and income offices. Since then, Carmel Cepoloni says the Ministry of Social Development has been planning and trialling different designs, layouts and office features to make offices safer.
The starting point has to be, is this place safe for staff and clients? Is it a positive and welcoming environment for staff and clients? And that has been our focus.
In the main office area, where case managers meet with clients, desks are lined up on each side of the room. The Ministry's Deputy Chief Executive, Viv Rickard, says curved wooden panelling at each desk is designed to give clients more privacy.
They've asked for that. It's been really important to them that they didn't want to be seen by everybody when they walk in, and actually when they're having a conversation about some quite personal circumstances that, you know, it's not going to be overheard by everyone.
There are no screens separating staff from clients, but Viv Rickard says there are other subtle design features to give greater security. A single bar runs across the top of the desk.
It's open, but it does create some features where if someone wanted to jump over, it's just harder to jump over and do something through our staff. The majority of issues we deal with are threats, and at one end, you know, some physical assaults, but the vast majority are threats.
Kathleen Paraha from Auckland Action Against Poverty says the makeover will impress some people. She says changes to make clients feel like they have more privacy when they're talking to their case manager are especially important.
That'll go a long way, because a lot of people don't like discussing their problems in the open where everybody else can hear it.
But Kathleen Paraha says new furniture and spruced up offices won't fix everything at work and income.
I still think, is that going to give people what they're entitled to? You know, the changes, it's not the changes that's going to do it, it's the case managers.
Carmel Cepoloni hopes the changes will be rolled out to all of the Ministry of Social Development's 120 offices by 2020. Mō te hōtaka o te ahi, ko Sarah Robson, aho.
Pacific Island nations at the COP24 climate summit in Poland are calling large emitting nations to account as efforts continue to convert the Paris Agreement into a rules-based international framework. The talks in the city of Katowice have centred on the latest report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which says urgent action is needed to keep global warming to a maximum of 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels. RNZ Pacific's Jenny Mayer reports.
Vanuatu's Foreign Minister Ralph Regenvanu called out large developed countries for not doing enough.
It pains me deeply to have watched the people of the United States and other developed countries across the globe suffering the devastating impacts of climate-induced tragedies, while their professional negotiators are here at COP24 putting red lines through any mention of loss and damage in the Paris guidelines, and square brackets around any possibility for truthfully and accurately reporting progress against humanity's most existential threat.
Fiji has again appealed to industrialised nations for more funding for climate-vulnerable nations. Prime Minister Frank Bainimarama says while some of the Green Climate Fund finance has started to flow, it should be more focused on where it is needed most. While in Poland, Mr Bainimarama has launched Fiji's National Adaptation Plan, which he says is a systematic and strategic approach to adaptation in all government decision-making.
We are placing a particular emphasis on agriculture, on fisheries, biodiversity, health, and a range of adaptation action in all of our communities.
The plan will include building seawalls and relocating communities threatened by rising seas, as well as strengthening infrastructure through improved building codes to withstand extreme weather events that are now more frequent and intense. Mr Bainimarama says countries need to make a 5-fold increase in their climate ambitions to cap global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial levels and achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050. On this front, the Marshall Islands is leading by example, launching its roadmap to decarbonise its electricity sector by 2050. Its Minister for the Environment, David Paul, says the Marshall Islands will go from a very modest 2% of renewables to over 50% renewables by cutting diesel use by half.
We are also committed
to taking real action. In September, we published our long-term strategy to achieve net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, as well as to achieve climate resilience. We are only one of 10 countries to have done so, and the first island nation.
Mr. Paul says business as usual is simply not acceptable, describing the IPCC report as a shocking wake-up call to the world. This is Jenny Meyer.
The police are appealing for information as they continue to investigate the death of a 55-year-old in Auckland. Shannon Shelby Baker was found dead at a house in Sandringham on Tuesday morning. His death is being treated as a homicide. The police are wanting to speak to members of the public who may have seen Mr. Baker's green Mercedes in the area on Monday night or early Tuesday morning. If you're watching, you'll be able to see a photo of the car on screen right now. The vehicle was last seen exiting the motorway at St Luke's just before 10:30 on Monday night. Donald Trump says he never instructed his former lawyer, Michael Cohen, to break the law. In his first interview since Cohen was sentenced to prison, the president suggested his lawyer's allegations were an attempt to embarrass him. Cohen, who worked as Mr. Trump's lawyer for years before later turning against his boss and cooperating with prosecutors, was sentenced to 3 years in jail this week after pleading guilty to numerous crimes. They included tax evasion and campaign finance violations pertaining to hush money payments during the 2016 campaign to two women who claimed past affairs with Donald Trump. CNN's Jim Acosta has more.
Everybody in?
President Trump, who once bragged he only hires the best people, is now admitting in the case of his former attorney Michael Cohen, sometimes mistakes are made.
I liked him, and he was a lawyer, and because of that, I did it. And you know what? In retrospect, I made a mistake.
In an interview with Fox, the president claimed federal prosecutors in New York were out to embarrass him by forcing Cohen to admit he paid hush money to a porn star and a Playboy playmate to cover up Mr. Trump's affairs just before the 2016 election.
Because what he did was all unrelated to me, except for the two campaign finance charges that are not criminal and shouldn't have been on there. They put that on to embarrass me. They put those two charges on to embarrass me. They're not criminal charges.
But that's not true, as the payments Cohen said Mr. Trump directed him to make were found to be crimes. Even the parent company of the National Enquirer admitted in the case that it was also part of the hush money scheme. The president seemed to have an answer for all of that as well, insisting it was Cohen's job not to break the law.
Let me tell you, I never directed him to do anything wrong. Whatever he did on his own. He's a lawyer. A lawyer who represents a client is supposed to do the right thing. That's why you pay them a lot of money.
Yet even as the president said he relied on Cohen to stay out of hot water, he mocked his former fixer's legal skills.
Title of very low-level work.
Why did you need him?
He did more public relations than he did law, but he did stuff. You'd see him on television. He was okay on television.
The president tends to downplay the roles of his former aides who find themselves in legal jeopardy. Consider what he tweeted about his now convicted foreign policy advisor, George Papadopoulos. Few people knew the young, low-level volunteer named George, who was already proven to be a liar. And don't forget how the president referred to his former campaign chairman, Paul Manafort, now a convicted felon.
You know, Paul Manafort worked for me for a very short period of time.
But the president is defending his former national security advisor, Michael Flynn, who's asking for no prison time in his legal saga.
They took a general that they said didn't lie, and they convinced him he did lie, and he made some kind of a deal. And now they're recommending no time.
But that's not exactly true. Flynn pleaded guilty to lying to federal investigators about his contacts with the Russians during the transition period in late 2016. Yet the president repeated that claim later in the day.
Well, the FBI said Michael Flynn, a general and a great person, they said he didn't lie. And Mueller said, well, maybe he did. And now they're all having a big dispute.
The president was spreading other falsehoods away from the Russia investigation, claiming once again that Mexico will somehow pay for a border wall, tweeting, I often stated one way or the other Mexico is going to pay for the wall. This has never changed. Our new deal with Mexico and Canada is so much better than the old, very costly and anti-USA NAFTA deal, that just by the money we save, Mexico is paying for the wall. Democrats are saying, hold on.
What money is he talking about that's going to go pay for the wall? It just doesn't measure up.
House Democrat leader Nancy Pelosi ending that report from CNN's Jim Acosta. More than 17,000 US citizens registered to move to New Zealand in November of 2016 when Donald Trump was elected President of the United States. Immigration New Zealand says site visits jumped by 2,500% after the election. So how many Americans actually followed through and moved here? Our reporter Jessie Chang tracked down one family who moved their entire lives more than 12,000 kilometres from Texas to Auckland.
We will make America great again. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Every American presidential election arguably captures the attention of many, but the eyes of the world were glued to the rise of former reality television host and businessman Donald Trump in 2016, some with rapt delight and others with shock horror. Texas natives John and Madeline Nash were a part of the latter group. They had talked about moving before the election, but with deep roots there, digging them up and moving was tough.
So it was what we had always known. You know, we have family there, we had friends there, we had a community in Texas.
We still do.
We still do, yeah, that's true. And it was something where we could envision raising our kids there, but slowly things started to change.
Changes like the unavoidable reality of school shootings. The Nashes have two children, 5-year-old Robert and 3-year-old Meadow. Going to school open days were confronting.
The parent tour was 60 minutes long, and 15 of that was spent on how proud they are of their live shooter drills in school. And that's just shocking to think about, that the schools are spending that much time and emphasis preparing kids on what to do when someone with a gun comes into a school.
Mr. Nash says gun control was a problem he could no longer ignore.
There's this new reality, which is children are no longer safe, and they can't be made safe, and you don't know where it's going to happen, and you don't know when it's going to happen. And that the level of fear that goes along with that is so intense that everybody has to prepare and everybody has to think about it. And the politics are so intractable that there is no solution that's going to come anytime soon, if ever. So, you know, you look at all those dynamics and you think, wow, okay, this is kind of messy. What are the alternatives? And the alternative that we quickly wrapped our heads around was, let's go someplace else.
It all came to a head on the 8th of November 2016. Like many Democrats, the Nashes thought Hillary Clinton had it in the bag, but then results started coming in.
And I remember having a very real fight or flight, bodily reaction to that, because it was frightening. I mean, it was this. Even though I was not in any physical danger or anything like that, that's kind of what it felt like. As more poll results came in and it became more and more obvious, we kind of sat down and looked at each other, and I think over the next day or two, we were part of that massive group of people who were checking out immigration websites.
There were more than 7,000 registrations from American citizens interested in moving to New Zealand in a 24-hour period the day after the election. At the time, Immigration New Zealand said it normally received about 3,000 registrations a month. The Nashes had never visited, but were determined to give it a go.
I don't think New Zealand would have been on our radar without those criteria, but they were the right criteria for us. And then we started doing some research into New Zealand, and New Zealand is a world beater in a lot of the categories that are
care about.
It's God's own, right? It's that wonderful here, and we didn't know it because we had never been here. But the pictures look good, so we thought, all right,
we'll give it a try.
Yeah. And we've been really happy with that decision.
Whilst there were huge amounts of interest from fellow Americans, only about 1,800 have been granted a work or residence visa since October 2016. The Nash family moved to New Zealand in June this year, and they say even a Democrat win in 2020 won't tempt them to go back.
If the Democrats win in 2020, there has been so much fire stoked on both sides that it has the potential to be combustible.
So it's little country at the bottom of the world instead of the brimming metropolis of Austin for the Nashes. and that's just fine with them. Mo te hōtaka o te ahi nei, Kōrisi Chang tēnei.
And just enough time for a bit more of your feedback here on our earlier story. Well, the story we've been following this week from about an MSD client who's had his debt wiped for emergency accommodation, just over $10,000. He slept in his car on and off. He had a severe medical condition, which meant he had to use a wheelchair at the time, and that condition was potentially fatal. And he says MSD did not treat him well. This email in saying, I'd like to thank the Checkpoint team for trying to get a resolution for him and the struggle he has been through. She says, he is my younger brother and watching his interview was so sad. He's correct to say that he went through it on his own at the time because unfortunately, she says, we lost our mum not long before he had his accident, which caused him to need support from work and income. The pain of losing our mum was very deep for us to deal with. I'll leave it there, but once again, a huge thanks to the Checkpoint team. And she signs it off by saying, sorry for the spelling mistakes. I'm typing this through tears. Other feedback on that story, one texter suggested that one of the reasons that the debts are still on the books, these are the emergency accommodation grants, is that it's called an asset and boosts the surplus, this person says. A neat accounting trick. The same applies to student loans. Another texter says, is there a case for this man to get damages or compensation for the distress that was caused, given it was an MSD error? And from MSD, we'd had an email confirming that they attempted to call this man twice today. They then went out and delivered a letter to him that they had posted the day before, and there was an apology contained in that letter. Hey, we'll be back next week, so join us again then. Talk to you Monday.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. A young patient who's contracted the deadly MenW strain of meningococcal disease has been transferred to Starship Children's Hospital. Rugby clubs are being reminded to store their scrum machines properly after a 4-year-old girl died in an accident in Manurewa yesterday. A union for other health workers is backing midwives' claims of government interference in pay talks. The first work and income office fully fitted with new security features has opened in Otara. And a Waikato iwi has initialed its Treaty of Waitangi deed of settlement with the Crown, valued at more than $8 million. Our next news and weather is at 7.
10 years ago, a Horowhenua-based horticulturalist thought the region was undervalued in terms of what it produced and grew, and that needed to change.
He's always had this idea that people should open up their doors and travel around, and we sort of said, oh, whatever, Jeff,